It began on an ordinary morning in Montecito, or at least that's how it looked from the outside. The California sun was spilling across the Sussex estate, the same peaceful neighborhood that had, for years, become a refuge for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. From afar, the manicured lawns, the tall privacy hedges, and the gentle sound of the Pacific breeze painted a picture of calm domestic bliss. But behind those gates, something had shifted. Something cold, tense, and almost unspoken. Harry had felt it for weeks. He just didn't know how deep it ran until that day. He woke up uneasy. Meghan had left early, claiming she had a meeting in Santa Barbara. Another vague, creative collaboration. The kind she'd mentioned dozens of times. Harry barely responded that morning. He watched her car disappear down the winding driveway, that familiar black SUV glinting under the morning light, and something inside him stirred. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't paranoia. It was instinct, that same gut feeling that once kept him alive in war zones. Only this time, the battlefield was his own home. He paced the kitchen, made a cup of tea, and tried to shake it off. He told himself he was imagining things, that maybe it was just stress. The press had been relentless again. The tabloids were filled with whispers about strained finances, canceled deals, and fading relevance. He'd been through worse storms, but something felt different now. It wasn't until an hour later that his unease turned into suspicion. Meghan had forgotten her handbag, the tan leather one she carried everywhere. It was sitting on the counter next to the keys of her second car, a sleek black Range Rover she rarely drove anymore. Harry thought of calling her, but curiosity made him hesitate. That car had barely moved in weeks. He couldn't remember the last time she'd used it. Something made him walk toward it. He stepped into the garage. The air was cool still. The Range Rover gleamed under the dim light. He opened the driver's door, the scent of her perfume still faint on the seat. He wasn't looking for anything. Not really. But when his eyes fell on the glove box, slightly ajar, something told him to look. His fingers hovered for a second. Then he pulled it open. There, beneath a pair of sunglasses and a few old receipts, was an envelope. Cream-colored, folded twice, with Meghan's handwriting on the front. Elegant, deliberate, and unmistakably hers. But it wasn't addressed to anyone. It simply read, "Private." Harry hesitated. His first thought was that it might be personal, maybe notes from her therapy sessions or correspondence with her publicist. But curiosity and dread were already intertwined. He slipped the envelope open, and inside was a single stapled document. He froze when he saw the header, "Confidential Agreement, Client Markle M. /Star Image Group." The air seemed to thicken. He turned the page slowly, scanning the first few lines, his heart pounding faster with each word. It wasn't a brand deal. It wasn't a Netflix proposal. It was something far more calculated. It was a contract, public relations contract. The language was polished, corporate, and chillingly precise. It outlined strategic reputation management, controlled narrative development, and public engagement staging. Each clause read like a playbook, not for royal duty, but for manipulation. The words "target audience reconditioning" stood out like a knife. And beneath that, leveraging crisis optics to reinforce subject sympathy and narrative dominance. He blinked, barely able to process what he was reading. A part of him hoped it was fake, some old draft, some PR nonsense she'd never signed. But his breath caught when his eyes fell on the bottom of the page. The signature, Meghan Markle, and beside it another, the name of a Hollywood PR fixer he recognized instantly. He'd heard of this man before, a reputation cleaner for some of Hollywood's most scandal-ridden figures, the kind of handler who could turn a scandal into a comeback story, someone who specialized in managing public sympathy and controlling the press with surgical precision. Harry's hands began to tremble. He turned to the second page. There were sections labeled Royal Narrative Segmentation and Strategic Partner Placement. One paragraph referenced controlled exposure through verified leaks. Another mentioned scheduled media intervention upon conflict peaks. He didn't understand all the jargon, but he understood enough. It was about him, about their image, about the royal family. He kept reading until he reached a line that made his stomach twist. Subject H to be framed as emotional anchor to reinforce humanitarian brand identity. Subject H. There was no mistaking it. That was him. Harry sat back in the driver's seat, the paper trembling in his hands. His breath came in shallow bursts. He could hear the faint sound of the gardener's rake outside, birds chirping in the distance. Normal sounds, absurdly normal, while his world tilted off its axis. He looked at the dates. The contract was signed months ago. Around the same time Meghan had urged him to distance himself from certain royal relatives, to control the narrative, to take their story back. He'd believed her. He'd thought they were a team. But now it looked like she had been running her own operation. Behind his back. He read on. There were clauses about exclusivity agreements with media intermediaries, the kind that controlled which outlets would get specific leaks. Mentions of conflict-based promotional cycles. There were even budget allocations for crisis event management and public apology scripting. His pulse hammered in his temples. Every scandal, every perfectly timed photo, every emotional interview suddenly looked different. Was it all real, or was it crafted? He flipped through the last page and found something that made his breath stop entirely. It was a handwritten note. A single sentence beneath the printed text, in Meghan's cursive. Remember, perception is power. The palace can't control what people feel if we get there first. That was the moment something broke in him. He dropped the papers on the seat beside him and pressed his palms to his face. Everything he'd believed about their shared mission, to live free, to tell their truth, to escape manipulation, it all began to crumble. He had left the royal family because he thought it was full of lies, control, and image management. And yet, here was the woman he loved, seemingly doing the same thing. He wanted to scream. He wanted to confront her immediately. But another thought crept in, slow and cold. If she had gone this far, if she'd hidden this, what else was she capable of? He stepped out of the car, gripping the envelope. His security detail was stationed near the gate, watching silently. Harry muttered something, half to himself. I need a word inside. They followed him in. He locked the door behind him and laid the papers on the table. His voice was calm, too calm. He knew what panic looked like. He'd seen it in combat. This wasn't panic. This was betrayal turned into control. He called Meghan's phone. No answer. He tried again. Straight to voicemail. He paced. He didn't want to overreact. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But the silence from her end was deafening. He opened his laptop and searched the name of the Hollywood fixer. Dozens of results appeared. Stories about manipulated narratives, image makeovers, scandals turned into sympathy campaigns. Every client had one thing in common. Controversy turned profitable. He looked at the headlines and felt sick. For a moment, he considered calling someone from the palace. He'd promised himself never to go back, never to drag them into his private matters. But this wasn't just personal anymore. This could damage the monarchy itself. The contract mentioned reputation restructuring in context of royal institution backlash. That line alone could ignite chaos if it ever reached the media. He could almost hear his grandmother's voice. Calm, steady, filled with that old royal wisdom. Duty before emotion, Harry. He dialed a number he hadn't called in months. It rang twice before someone answered. Sir. Harry hesitated. It's urgent, he said. I think there's been a breach. Before the official could respond, another call came through. Meghan. He switched lines. Her tone was unusually bright. Hey, I saw I missed your call. What's going on? Harry's voice was low, measured. Where are you right now? I'm just leaving the meeting. Why? You forgot something. In your car. There was a pause. Then a change in her tone. Subtle, sharp, defensive. What do you mean? I think you know what I mean. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy as lead. Then she spoke softly, almost rehearsed. Harry, you don't understand. This is how things work here. You have to play the game. His voice cracked. Behind my back? She exhaled sharply. If I told you, you would have stopped me. You never see the bigger picture. The conversation ended with words neither could take back. Within the hour, Meghan was home. Furious, tearful, demanding to see the envelope. But by then, Harry had already handed it to security. He didn't want a scene. He didn't want shouting. But the look in her eyes told him that calm wasn't an option. She reached for the papers and he stepped back, shaking his head. That's when he made the call. Security, his own men, stepped between them. The house went silent. The only sound was the echo of his voice, steady but broken. Please escort her out. I need time. The world outside kept spinning. Photographers waiting at the gates. Neighbors unaware of the explosion that had just occurred inside. But something irreversible had shifted between them. And though the news hadn't broken yet, those closest to the couple would later say that was the day the marriage truly collapsed. The day a prince called security on his own wife. And what triggered it all was a single document, hidden in a glove box. One that might reveal a story far darker than anyone imagined. Because inside that envelope wasn't just a contract. It was proof. Proof that fame, love, and loyalty can never coexist easily in the shadow of the crown. And as the sun set on Montecito that evening, the question wasn't whether Harry could forgive her. It was whether he could ever believe her again. The days leading up to the discovery were deceptively calm. The kind of quiet that hides storms underneath. From the outside, the Sussex estate looked peaceful, idyllic, almost cinematic. The kind of life that magazines still tried to paint as the modern fairy tale. But inside the walls, something had been changing for months. Conversations that once flowed with laughter now ended in silence. Dinner together had become rare. And when they did sit across the same table, it felt like a negotiation more than a meal. Harry had tried to ignore it at first. Every relationship goes through rough patches, he told himself. The pressure, the press, the lawsuits, the expectations, it was enough to test anyone. But deep down, he knew something about this felt different. The tension wasn't coming from the outside world this time. It was coming from within their home. He'd started noticing little things. Meghan would take calls late into the night, pacing through the garden with her phone pressed tightly against her ear, speaking in a tone that didn't sound like her usual publicist conversations. Once, when he asked who it was, she smiled faintly and said, "Just someone from the team." But which team? She had a growing circle of Hollywood advisors. PR specialists, stylists, consultants, people Harry barely knew, people who seemed to orbit her more closely than anyone else. At first, he brushed it off as part of her work. After all, she was rebuilding her brand, stepping into production, partnerships, and charity work. But then the secrecy deepened. Phone calls would end abruptly when he entered the room. Emails would vanish from shared accounts. And once, while using the shared office computer, he noticed a document titled Phase 2 Image Reinforcement Strategy. It disappeared before he could open it. The irony was not lost on him. He'd left a palace that ran on image management, a system built on polished smiles and hidden truths. He had sworn he would never live that way again. And yet, it was creeping back into his life, just under a different roof. Even the energy in the house had changed. The laughter of their children was still there, but it echoed differently now, like joy trying to fill a void. Meghan had grown more withdrawn, her mood swinging from affectionate to distant in the span of hours. One moment she was warm, planning a new initiative with enthusiasm. The next, she was curt, defensive, as if shielding something. Harry began spending more time outside, walking the property, talking with security, or sitting in the garden where his mother's memory often came to him. He would close his eyes and think of her. Diana's voice, her warmth, her honesty. She'd always told him to trust his instincts. When something feels off, don't wait for proof, she had said once in his memory. Truth always leaves a trail. Those words echoed more loudly now. One afternoon, he noticed a black SUV parked a little further down the street. Unfamiliar, tinted windows, engine idling. Security later told him it was a guest of Meghan's visiting consultant. He didn't question it, but a quiet unease took root. Hollywood consultants, media handlers, strategists. They all seemed to appear and vanish like ghosts lately. Conversations with Meghan became shorter, sharper. "You don't trust anyone anymore?" she told him one night after an argument. "You've become paranoid." He'd wanted to reply, but the words caught in his throat. Maybe he was paranoid. Maybe he had seen too much deception in his life to tell the difference anymore. But the difference now was that the suspicion wasn't about the tabloids, or the firm, or the courtiers. It was about his own home. He noticed another change, her sudden interest in solo outings. Meetings in Los Angeles, lunches with unnamed producers, events he wasn't invited to. When he asked why, she would smile and say, "You don't like these things anyway." It was true he avoided publicity, but lately, these meetings seemed to multiply, each more mysterious than the last. One evening, he came across her personal planner on the kitchen island. The page for that week had an entry written in a different handwriting. Not Meghan's neat cursive, but something sharper, almost businesslike. It read, "Follow up with SI Group, finalize narrative outline." He'd never heard of SI Group before. When he asked her about it later, she brushed it aside. "Just some creative brand advisors," she said quickly, before changing the subject. That night, sleep wouldn't come easily. Harry sat by the window, watching the faint glow of the Pacific horizon. Something inside him was unraveling. Not anger yet, just confusion mixed with a growing dread. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that whatever was happening was harmless. But the truth had a strange way of knocking louder the more you ignored it. The next morning, while playing with the children, he overheard one of the household staff mentioning that Meghan's black Range Rover hadn't been used in months but was suddenly serviced last week and refueled. Struck him as odd. Why would she prepare a car she barely drove? He dismissed it at first, but when he walked past the garage later, he noticed that same car had its driver's window slightly open, as if someone had been sitting there recently. He didn't think much of it until later that evening, when Meghan, dressed sharply, announced she had to run a quick errand in town. "What for?" he asked. "Just some paperwork," she replied casually, avoiding his eyes. He didn't press her, but that word, paperwork, stayed with him. It wasn't unusual, but it carried a weight that he couldn't shake. He remembered her tone, controlled, distant. As days passed, the distance widened. They would go hours without speaking. When they did, it often turned into small disagreements about the children's schooling, about media appearances, about her social plans. She accused him of being unsupportive. He accused her of secrecy. Neither realized they were already standing on opposite sides of something breaking. But the silence between those arguments was even worse. It wasn't peaceful. It was loaded, electric, like air before a storm. Even the staff began to notice. Conversations stopped when one of them entered the room. Bodyguards exchanged glances they didn't dare explain. Harry's nights became longer. He'd sit in the library, flipping through old letters from his father, or messages from William he'd never answered. His phone would buzz with missed calls from royal aides trying to coordinate security logistics for upcoming events. He ignored most of them. He couldn't face the old world right now. Yet, ironically, it was that same world he now found creeping back into his own house, the world of handlers, deals, and secrets. One evening, he received a message from a trusted acquaintance in the UK press, someone who had quietly tipped him off about stories in the past. The message was brief. "Something big is coming out of LA regarding you too. Not sure who's behind it. Be alert." He didn't tell Meghan about it. He simply sat there staring at the screen, that familiar knot forming in his chest. Was someone setting them up again? Or was the storm coming from closer than he thought? That night, he dreamt of his mother. She was walking away from flashing lights, holding his hand. He asked where they were going, and she turned to him and said, "Some things you have to see for yourself, Harry. No one can tell you." He woke up before dawn, heart racing, the dream still vivid. That morning, Meghan left early again. She kissed the children quickly, told Harry she'd be back before lunch, and disappeared in that black SUV. Her tone was cheerful, but her eyes betrayed something else. Tension, distraction, maybe guilt. He couldn't tell anymore. When the house fell silent, Harry wandered outside with a cup of tea. The quiet pressed on him heavier than usual. He found himself drawn again to that second car, the one she rarely used, the one sitting idle in the garage. He paused, staring at it through the window. Something compelled him to walk closer, to open it, to look inside. He couldn't have known that what he was about to find inside that glove box would unravel everything. But the signs were there, hidden in plain sight. The late-night calls, the strange... When he reached the garage, he stopped at the doorway. Meghan's black Range Rover was gone, but her second car, the less used one, sat quietly in the corner. It was the same one he'd been thinking about for days. The dust on the hood, the faint scent of leather when he'd peeked in last time. He hesitated. Then he walked toward it. He opened the driver's door and slid into the seat. The air inside was cool, faintly perfumed. It smelled like her favorite blend, gardenia and citrus. He ran his hand along the steering wheel, glancing around. Nothing unusual at first glance. Water bottle in the holder, a few receipts, a scarf on the passenger seat. But then he noticed the glove box, slightly open, like someone had closed it in a hurry. He leaned forward. Something white peeked from the edge. For a moment, he told himself not to look. He didn't want to become the man who searched through his wife's things. But that small voice in his head, the same one that had guided him through danger before, told him to open it. He pulled the latch. Inside, among ordinary clutter, a pair of sunglasses, registration papers, an old parking ticket, lay a cream-colored envelope. It was neatly folded and sealed with a paperclip. His breath slowed. Written across the front, in Meghan's distinctive handwriting, were two words, private contract. His stomach dropped. He sat there for a moment, frozen. His thumb brushed against the paper, feeling the weight of it. The handwriting was recent. He could tell by the ink, smooth, not faded. This wasn't an old document. He looked around, half expecting to see someone watching him. But the garage was empty, just the hum of silence and his own pulse thudding in his ears. He unfastened the paperclip and opened it. The first page carried a printed logo, Star Image Group. The name immediately struck him. He'd seen it before in headlines. It belonged to a Hollywood PR consultancy infamous for handling celebrity crises. They were the kind of firm called when a public figure's reputation was in flames, the kind that didn't fix problems, but rewrote them. His eyes scanned the page. Confidential agreement. Client, M. Markle. Underneath, lines of text began to blur together in his mind as he tried to process them. Phrases like narrative calibration, controlled exposure, and reputational synchronization strategy appeared again and again. He turned the page. His throat tightened. There it was, his name, referenced in cold, clinical terms, subject H. Each clause outlined a plan that made his stomach twist. Scheduled interviews, pre-planned public interactions, even the supposed spontaneous moments they'd shared with the media after major royal events. His mind flashed to the charity visits, the walks through crowded streets, the photos where Meghan had insisted they pause just for a moment. Were those moments genuine or orchestrated to build a specific image? He turned to the next page. A bold header read, Crisis Development and Emotional Framing. Below, a list of bullet points described techniques to shape public empathy, strategic vulnerability moments, narrative conflict escalation, emotional payoff delivery. It wasn't PR. It was theater. He could barely breathe. He turned to the final page, and that's when he saw it, Meghan's signature. Bold, elegant, and beneath it, the signature of the Hollywood PR fixer himself. He whispered the name under his breath. He knew it well. This man had handled some of the biggest reputation overhauls in modern celebrity culture. Scandals, divorces, lawsuits, turned into inspirational redemption stories. And now his wife was on that client list. Harry sat back in the seat, paper trembling in his hand. Every instinct screamed disbelief. He wanted to think it was fake, a forgery, some kind of misunderstanding. But the dates matched too closely. The language was too specific. The alignment with events they'd lived through. Too precise to be coincidence. His pulse thundered. He scanned the notes in the margins, handwritten lines in Meghan's tidy cursive. One read, "Push sympathy arc post-controversy." Another said, "Leverage H's authenticity factor in crisis stage." He stopped reading. His vision blurred for a moment, and he closed his eyes, pressing his palms against his forehead. So that was it. That was why the timing of every article, every appearance, every public controversy had felt deliberate. It was part of a campaign, a structure designed to control not only the public but him as well. He felt an almost physical pain, like betrayal had turned tangible. He thought of their wedding, her tears, their vows, the promises whispered about truth and freedom. Now those words echoed like lines from a movie script written long before he'd read it. He folded the papers slowly, his hands still trembling. He wanted to storm out, to call her, to demand an explanation. But something told him to stay calm. Years of military training took over. When chaos hits, you observe before you act. He placed the document on the seat beside him, leaned back, and stared at the dashboard. Every memory began replaying in a new light. Her speeches about controlling our story, her insistence on certain photographers, her emotional interviews that always seemed perfectly timed. The realization hit him like a wave. Maybe she hadn't escaped the system. Maybe she'd simply built her own version of it. He sat there in silence, the envelope resting beside him, as the weight of truth settled in. His phone buzzed on the dashboard. A message from Meghan. "Don't forget to pick up the kids' things today." Simple, innocent, ordinary. He stared at the message for a long time, his mind spinning with the contrast between that casual text and the pages he'd just read. Minutes turned into an hour. The silence felt heavier than ever. Finally, he stood, took the envelope and walked back into the house. His steps echoed down the hallway. He placed the document flat on the dining table, staring at it as though it might vanish if he blinked. He poured himself a glass of water, but his hands were shaking too much to drink it. Every instinct said to confront her immediately, but part of him was afraid, not of her anger, but of her explanation. What if she didn't deny it? What if she justified it? By early afternoon, he decided to call her. She didn't pick up. He tried again. Voicemail. He left no message. When she finally returned home hours later, the tension was palpable. She walked in, sunglasses still on, smiling faintly. "Hey, you're home," she said. He was standing by the table, the document in front of him. "We need to talk," he said, his voice calm but firm. She froze. Her eyes darted to the envelope, then back to him. For a brief second, her expression faltered. Not shock, not confusion, but recognition. "Where did you find that?" she asked softly. "In your car," he replied. "In the glove box." Her silence said everything. "What is this?" he asked. "Who is this man? Why are you working with him?" She tried to explain, her words tumbling out faster than usual. Something about strategy, about survival, about the need to protect their image. But every word only made it worse. She said she did it for them, for their future, for their freedom. But all Harry heard was deception. He felt his voice rise for the first time in weeks. "Freedom? You call this freedom? You've been orchestrating everything, even me." The room fell silent. Her eyes filled with anger and tears, the mixture that always came before a fight. She reached for the document, but he pulled it away. "No," he said quietly. "You don't get to hide this." That's when he did something he'd never imagined he'd have to do. He called for security. The men arrived within minutes, confused but professional. They stood in the doorway, waiting for instruction. Harry's voice was calm, though his heart was breaking. "Please take this document to the study. Keep it secure." Meghan's voice cracked. "Harry, this is insane. You're overreacting." He looked at her, the woman he'd once left the world for, and said nothing. His silence was louder than any accusation. She turned away, muttering, pacing, her voice trembling with frustration. But he didn't respond. He just stood there, watching, as security carefully took the envelope away. When they left the room, Meghan whispered something he could barely hear. "You'll regret this." Maybe he would. But in that moment he couldn't care. Because the truth, once seen, can't be unseen. And that was the day he saw it all, the lies, the manipulation, the machinery behind the love story. It was the day the prince discovered what was really hidden in his wife's glove box. And it would change everything that came after. When the name on that document first met Harry's eyes, it felt like a ghost from another world had stepped into his life. A world he'd spent years trying to escape. The name was sharp, familiar, and unervingly powerful. The kind that never appeared in tabloids, yet controlled the narratives that did. In Hollywood, this man was known as the image surgeon. His real name appeared at the bottom of the contract in crisp black ink, followed by an unmistakable logo, Star Image Group. Harry remembered hearing it before. Years ago, during a late-night conversation with a journalist friend, he'd been told that if a scandal ever needed rewriting, this was the man you called. A fixer who specialized in invisibility, not by hiding stories, but by transforming them. A divorce became a brave personal journey. A public meltdown became a misunderstood creative struggle. To his clients, he was salvation. To his enemies, he was manipulation in human form. Now that name sat beneath Meghan's signature. He typed it into his laptop, heart racing, fingers trembling slightly as the search bar filled. Dozens of results flooded the screen, news features, leaked reports, quiet whispers across entertainment columns. Each headline painted the same picture. A man who could make or break reputations with a single call. One article called him the man behind every comeback in Hollywood. Another described him as the invisible hand guiding the narrative arcs of fallen stars. His client list, though confidential, had been hinted at in gossip circles, actors, singers, politicians, and even royals adjacent to the entertainment industry. The pattern was clear. He was called in when someone's image needed to be rebuilt after a major controversy. Harry scrolled further, reading the description of his methods: media infiltration, selective leaks, emotional storytelling, and public sentiment engineering. It sounded almost surgical. Every move calculated, every headline timed to shift perception just enough to sway public opinion without revealing the manipulation behind it. He could feel the chill rise in his chest. This wasn't simple PR. This was an entire system designed to manipulate truth itself. He turned to look at the document again, the details now stinging harder. The sections weren't generic media strategies. They were tailored, detailed, disturbingly specific to his own life. Under key subject dynamics, the document referenced sympathetic audience manipulation and public emotional engagement anchored in shared trauma. He swallowed hard. Trauma. That was the word they had used, his trauma. For years, he had spoken publicly about his mental health, about losing his mother, about trying to heal. Those were supposed to be his truths, raw, personal, unfiltered. Now it looked like those truths had been repurposed, rebranded into marketing assets. The realization hit him with quiet force. Someone had found a way to turn his pain into currency. He read the next section, Projected Media Narrative Framework. It outlined an 18-month timeline of reputation reengineering following key controversies, with benchmarks for public sympathy restoration, heroic opposition positioning, and controlled emotional downturns. It was like reading the script of their lives. Every major media moment, the interviews, the viral photos, the emotional statements, all lined up perfectly with the timeline. Harry leaned back in the chair, staring blankly at the document. It was as though his life had been transformed into a product, his story carved into a brand strategy. He thought of the fixer himself, this man operating from behind closed doors. What kind of person made a living out of shaping people's truths? According to the articles, he had started as a publicist for crisis-hit celebrities in the 1990s, gaining a reputation for his ability to reverse-engineer scandal. His methods were unconventional, leaking selective truths to overshadow damaging lies, planting redemption narratives weeks before major interviews, and controlling which insiders spoke to the press. But the most chilling detail came from an old interview quoted in a magazine profile. The fixer had once said, "The truth is overrated. Perception is permanent." Harry reread that line over and over again. It echoed painfully against Meghan's own handwritten note on the contract. "Remember, perception is power." The parallel was undeniable. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out across the garden. The California sunlight suddenly felt harsh, almost accusing. He remembered how Meghan used to say, "We'll show them who we really are." It used to comfort him, the idea that they were fighting back against unfair press. But now he wondered if show them really meant control them. He went back to his laptop and kept digging. The more he read, the clearer it became that this fixer wasn't just managing image, he was manufacturing reality. One story detailed how he'd allegedly orchestrated paparazzi photos of a celebrity caught off guard at a grocery store, only for it to be revealed later that the photos were staged to make her appear relatable before a product launch. Another described how he had leaked a cheating scandal only to later manage the apology campaign, earning his client millions in renewed attention. Harry's stomach turned. This was the man his wife had hired, not to protect them, but to create a machine around them. He flipped to the back of the contract, where appendices outlined performance indicators and deliverables. Under Strategic Partnership Development, there were references to conflict acceleration opportunities and media event escalation. It wasn't damage control, it was engineered drama. One line in particular stopped him cold. Controlled conflict with royal institution to reinforce independence narrative. He whispered it aloud. Controlled conflict. So that's what it was, not coincidence, not fate. Every headline that had driven wedges between them and the royal family might have been part of a calculated plan. The fiery interviews, the emotional statements, the moments that had made him feel like a rebel prince. All part of an image ecosystem designed by someone who saw human lives as chess pieces. He slammed the laptop shut and rubbed his face, anger rising. He had left the palace to escape manipulation. He had abandoned the machinery of royal image control to live freely. Yet somehow, he had walked straight into another system, crafted by different hands but powered by the same deception. And the worst part, he had been blind to it. He picked up his phone and scrolled through old messages from Meghan. She'd often mentioned media strategy meetings or brand positioning calls, but he had never asked for details. He trusted her. He thought it was normal PR work for her ventures. But now, every one of those messages looked like another piece of a puzzle he hadn't realized he was part of. He sat at the table for what felt like hours, rereading, piecing together timelines, comparing events to the contract's projected milestones. The alignment was disturbing. Even their most personal moments, the ones the public had never known, seemed to fit neatly within phases of the narrative cycle. By evening, he'd memorized the fixer's name. He said it out loud once, letting the weight of it settle. This was the man who had reshaped Hollywood scandals, rewritten political narratives, and now, somehow, infiltrated his life. He decided to call a trusted contact, an old royal aide who had transitioned into private media consultancy after leaving the palace. When the man answered, Harry wasted no time. "What do you know about Star Image Group?" The voice on the other end went quiet for a moment. Then came a slow reply. "You should tread carefully, sir. They're not just PR. They build illusions. And once you're in their web, it's hard to tell what's real anymore." Harry felt a chill. "So you've heard of them?" "I've seen their work firsthand," the man said. "They don't just manage clients. They manage entire storylines, leaks, interviews, relationships, even reconciliations. If someone wants to rewrite history, they're the ones who do it." He thanked him quietly and hung up. His mind was spinning. He looked again at Meghan's signature. He remembered the day she first told him they needed to redefine their story. She had sounded inspired, almost visionary. He had admired that confidence. But now he wondered, was it ever about them at all? Or had it always been about her empire, her spotlight, her image? He didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself, or the realization that he'd been a character in a story someone else was writing. Outside, the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky with orange streaks. Inside, the house felt colder. The weight of what he knew pressed on his chest like a secret too heavy to hold. He poured himself a drink but couldn't bring himself to take a sip. His reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar. Not a prince, not a husband, just a man staring at the wreckage of trust. He closed his eyes and tried to remember the beginning, the simplicity of falling in love, the laughter, the promise of freedom. But now that memory felt tainted, too. He thought of the fixer again, this faceless manipulator shaping their public lives. And he realized that as long as that man's signature existed on that paper, the line between truth and illusion would never be clear again. He picked up the phone, dialing a number he hadn't used in months, the palace security liaison. When the voice answered, Harry said quietly, "I need to know if you've ever dealt with a man named—" He paused, then spoke the fixer's name. The reply came slowly. "Yes, sir. Once. Years ago. He's dangerous. He doesn't just work for clients. He collects leverage." Harry's grip tightened around the phone. Leverage. Information, sir. Personal, private. He stores everything, contracts, recordings, emails. He keeps them as insurance. The line went quiet. Harry exhaled. The puzzle was complete. The contract wasn't just a PR plan. It was leverage. A weapon. And if this man had one, who else did? He looked down at the papers one last time before locking them away in his study. His hands shook slightly as he closed the drawer. The fixer's name burned in his mind, repeating like a curse. Because deep down, Harry knew this wasn't just about publicity anymore. It was about control. And someone out there had been controlling his life, his image, and perhaps even his marriage from the shadows. The document sat in front of him like a living thing, harmless in appearance, yet pulsing with power. Establish the client as an empathetic figure through vulnerability displays, public recounting of adversity, and curated transparency. Introduce Subject H as emotional catalyst and anchor of sincerity. Subject H. He didn't need to ask who that was anymore. Reframe controversy fatigue through philanthropic redirection. Promote reemergence of the client as an evolved, enlightened leader, transcending prior constraints. Harry stared at those words for a long time. Emotional identification, conflict intensification, legacy reinforcement. It was a formula, a roadmap for public manipulation. A machine built to turn pain into power, outrage into influence, sympathy into capital. He thought of their interviews. Every pause, every tear, every phrasing about freedom and control. Was all of that rehearsed? Or had it simply been encouraged, structured, refined into something the world would consume easily? He flipped to the next section, where a table titled Public Narrative Schedule stretched across the page. It was laid out in months, from initiation to reaffirmation. Under month 3, it read, Target, Conflict Escalation with Royal Institution. Deliverable, Emotional Testimonial Interview. Month 7, Target, Media Retaliation Anticipation. Deliverable, Controlled Counterstatement. Month 10, Target, Narrative Fatigue Reversal. Deliverable, Humanitarian Project Announcement. Month 14, Target, Institutional Symbolism. Deliverable, Public Event Appearance with Contrasting Tone. Every deliverable matched a real moment in their timeline, the interviews, the speeches, the carefully timed public appearances. He could almost hear the PR meetings now. Calm voices discussing strategy while his personal pain was turned into bullet points. He flipped again. The next section was labeled Crisis Scenario Guidelines. It listed approved emotional postures for hypothetical situations. Backlash, leaks, family disputes. Each had scripted response frameworks. Example, scenario, accusations of deceit or manipulation. Response, center emotional fatigue and authenticity fatigue. Reiterate humanitarian intent. Avoid defensive tone. Another example, scenario, breakdown in royal relations. Response, utilize Subject H's emotional honesty to deflect institutional criticism. Reinforce unity under adversity. Harry's hands trembled slightly as he read that. They had mapped out his reactions before he ever made them. He flipped further and found a subsection marked Media Engagement Parameters. Here it was all about control. All interviews must be pre-approved through Star Image Group or partner intermediaries. Questions concerning the royal family to be redirected toward themes of self-liberation. Spontaneous public moments to be documented and distributed through controlled channels. And there it was again, controlled channels. He remembered countless times when Meghan had insisted on bringing her own photographer to events, ensuring our version would be the one that reached the public first. At the time, he thought it was just a precaution against misrepresentation. Now, he realized it was part of a much larger system, one built to dominate the narrative. He turned to the page labeled Confidential Annex, Secondary Objectives. The list was shorter but darker. Introduce selective information to trusted media partners to direct news cycles. Utilize emotional triggers to maintain engagement metrics. Control rumors to ensure controversy remains beneficial, not damaging. Frame subject H as stabilizing emotional presence during perceived crises. He felt his stomach twist at the last line. He had been turned into a prop, a character in an emotional economy he didn't even know existed. The following section made his blood run cold. Royal Narrative Segmentation. It divided their relationship with the royal family into categories: sympathetic, oppositional, and irrelevant. Each family member was listed under one. Queen Elizabeth II. Sympathetic, legacy respect narrative. Prince Charles, now king oppositional, institutional conflict narrative. Prince William. Oppositional, emotional rivalry narrative. Princess Catherine. Sympathetic transition, graceful contrast narrative. Princess and others. Irrelevant, non-engagement narrative. Every relationship reduced to storytelling value. Every family member turned into a role. He couldn't believe it. The people he loved, the ones he'd grown up with, had been assigned emotional functions like marketing assets. He leaned forward, whispering to himself, "This can't be real." But it was. The cold legal phrasing, the structure, the precision, it was too well constructed to be fantasy. He flipped again and reached the section that made everything personal: confidential compensation and performance clauses. His eyes locked onto the numbers. There it was, a financial structure linking public engagement metrics, media reach, sentiment analysis, social growth, to additional payments and bonuses. It wasn't just about influence, it was about revenue. Every emotional outburst, every viral clip, every trending headline could trigger payment. He felt sick. For the first time, he noticed a handwritten note in the margin. Meghan's handwriting again, elegant and curved. Adjust deliverables if royal backlash intensifies, could double exposure. Exposure. That word kept echoing in his mind. Exposure was supposed to mean visibility, honesty, openness. But here it was profit. He flipped through the last few pages, scanning for something, anything, that might redeem what he was reading. Instead, he found the final clause, stamped in bold. All assets, creative material, and emotional content produced through this partnership remain under strategic management discretion until campaign termination. Emotional content. That's what they called it. Not experiences, not stories, not moments, content. He sank back in his chair. His breathing had grown shallow. He remembered the first time Meghan had talked about owning their story. He'd believed it. He'd thought it meant freedom, a chance to speak without filters, to tell their truth without palace interference. But now it looked like owning the story meant controlling it and controlling him. The lamp flickered softly above the desk, and for a long time he just stared at the papers in silence. He thought of his children, Archie and Lilibet, and wondered if one day they'd read about this. Would they see their parents' lives as authentic or as performance? Would they even know the difference? He picked up the last page again, his eyes landing on the handwritten note at the bottom, the same one that had haunted him since the beginning. "Perception is power." He whispered it aloud, his voice trembling. Perception is power. It was more than a motto, it was a confession. He stood slowly, his mind swirling with disbelief and fury. Every moment of vulnerability he had ever shared with the public, Every tear, every confession had been monetized. The authenticity he thought defined him had been dissected, repackaged, and sold. And now, holding this paper in his hands, he realized he wasn't just fighting for his marriage. He was fighting for his own reality. The contract was proof that what the world saw wasn't always truth. That behind every image, every headline, every perfectly timed emotional moment, there might be something darker. A system that feeds on perception while killing sincerity. Harry placed the papers back into the envelope, sealed it, and stared at it one final time. That small, cream-colored packet had become the most dangerous thing in his possession. It wasn't just evidence of deceit. It was the key to understanding how his entire world had been built, shaped, and perhaps even destroyed by manipulation. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Because if that contract was real, it meant someone, somewhere, had been watching him for much longer than he realized. By the time Meghan pulled into the driveway, dusk had fallen across Montecito. The light was fading fast, the sky painted with streaks of purple and gold, the kind of evening that should have been peaceful. But the house felt anything but. Inside, the silence was tense, electric, heavy with the weight of words not yet spoken. Harry stood by the dining room table where the envelope lay in plain view. He hadn't moved for nearly an hour. His phone buzzed twice. Messages from staff, a reminder about an upcoming charity call. But he ignored them. His mind was fixed on the single truth sitting in front of him. He heard the crunch of gravel as Meghan's SUV pulled up, the soft thud of the car door, the echo of her heels approaching the house. She entered through the side door, humming lightly, her voice echoing down the hallway. To anyone else, she looked the same as always, polished, confident, composed. But Harry wasn't seeing her through the same eyes anymore. When she walked into the room, she stopped abruptly. Her gaze fell on the envelope on the table, the one she had never expected him to find. "Harry," she said softly, tilting her head, forcing a small smile. "What's this?" He didn't answer. Not yet. His silence stretched, deep and unsettling. He could see her growing uncomfortable, her body tensing under the weight of his stare. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You tell me." She blinked, the smile fading. "I don't understand." He reached for the envelope, sliding it toward her slowly. "You know exactly what it is." Her hand froze halfway toward it. The air between them thickened. The playful ease that once defined their marriage had evaporated, replaced by the raw, unfamiliar distance of two people standing on opposite sides of a truth too large to ignore. "Where did you get that?" she asked quietly. "In your car," he replied. "In the glove box." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted to the document, then back to him. For the briefest moment, he saw something flicker across her face. Not guilt exactly, but calculation. The expression of someone quickly assessing their next move. "I can explain," she said finally. "Then do it," he said. She exhaled, sitting down slowly, placing her purse on the chair beside her. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her skirt. "It's not what you think," she began, voice low, rehearsed. "It's a professional agreement. Everyone in this industry works with people like them. It's about managing public perception, that's all. Nothing sinister." Harry laughed softly, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. Managing perception? Meghan, this isn't just PR. It's manipulation. It's control. It's lies dressed up as strategy. She looked away, her jaw tightening. "We've been under attack for years. Every word we say gets twisted. Every move we make becomes a headline. You think I'm just going to sit back and let them destroy us?" He stepped closer, voice rising slightly. "So your solution was to sign a secret deal with one of the most notorious image fixers in Hollywood? Without telling me? I was protecting us?" She snapped, her tone suddenly sharp. "You don't understand how this works, Harry. You've never had to survive on your own reputation before. The palace controlled yours from the day you were born. I had to build mine." The words hung heavy in the air. He stared at her, stunned. "So that's what this is about?" You're building an empire, not a family. That's not fair, she said quickly. I did this for both of us. For our future. For the kids. You think those people in London would ever let us live peacefully? They still pull the strings, Harry. This was how we take control. He pointed at the papers. Control? That's not control. That's deceit. You've been scripting our lives like a reality show. Do you even hear yourself? She looked down, her voice dropping to a whisper. You wouldn't have understood. That sentence sliced through him. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. Soft, deliberate, patronizing. He stepped back, shaking his head slowly. You didn't even give me the chance to understand. Her eyes glistened now, tears forming but not falling. I was trying to save us, she said again. You think those people would ever stop coming after us? I did what I had to do. You're angry because you found out. Not because I did it. Harry's expression hardened. No, I'm angry because you lied. Because every time I looked at you, I thought I was looking at someone who believed in truth. We left everything behind because we said we wanted honesty. But now I see it was never about that. She stood up abruptly. Don't you dare twist this, she said, voice cracking. Everything I've done has been for this family. You think I enjoy this circus? You think I wanted to hire a fixer? I did it because no one else would protect us. Her words echoed through the room, desperate and fiery. For a moment, Harry saw the woman he fell in love with, strong, passionate, unwilling to surrender. But now that strength felt dangerous, weaponized. He turned toward the window, struggling to keep his composure. Do you even realize what's in that contract? They've turned me into a brand asset. My pain, my trauma, they've monetized it. She hesitated, her lips parting, but no words came. He spun around, eyes burning. You've used my name, my story, my family, to build your empire. Do you know what that feels like? To realize your entire life has been turned into content. She swallowed hard. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, he said sharply. You think perception is power, right? That's what you wrote. But perception without truth is manipulation. It's a lie. The tears that had been threatening finally spilled over. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. You don't know how much pressure I've been under. Everyone expects perfection. Every word, every photo, it's all judged. I thought if I could just control it, it would stop hurting. Her voice cracked, raw and trembling. I thought I could protect us. For a brief second, his anger softened. He saw the fear behind her words, the exhaustion of being scrutinized by millions, the endless war between image and reality. But the sympathy was fleeting, because no matter the reason, trust once shattered was almost impossible to rebuild. He walked to the table, picked up the envelope and held it out to her. This isn't protection. It's betrayal. It's proof that you don't trust me. Or us. She shook her head slowly, her tears falling freely now. You don't understand the game we're in. They were never going to let us win by being honest. He looked at her for a long time. Then maybe winning isn't worth it. Silence. The kind of silence that feels final. She wiped her tears, her voice barely audible. So what now? Harry didn't answer immediately. He walked toward the hallway and pressed the intercom. Can you come inside, please? He said quietly. His tone was steady, controlled. Within minutes, 2 members of his personal security detail appeared at the door. Meghan's eyes widened in disbelief. What are you doing? Just ensuring things don't escalate, he said softly. Harry, she said, her voice trembling now. You're calling security on me? He nodded once, his expression unreadable. I don't know what's real anymore, Meghan. I just know I need space. And that document stays here. She stepped back, shaking her head in shock. This is insane. He didn't respond. He simply gestured to the officers. Make sure she's comfortable. No cameras, no press. Just space. They hesitated, even they could feel the gravity of the moment, but followed his orders. Meghan stood frozen for a moment, tears glistening under the dim light. She turned toward him one last time. If you think you're protecting yourself by doing this, you're wrong. You're playing right into their hands. He met her gaze, his voice steady but heavy with pain. Maybe, but at least it'll be my decision this time. For a long moment, neither moved. The distance between them felt wider than oceans. Then she turned, collected her things silently, and followed the guards out. The front door closed behind her with a soft but final sound. Harry stood there in the empty room, staring at the space she had just left. The envelope sat on the table between them, untouched, a silent witness to everything that had just broken. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just exhaled, long and slow, as the house fell completely still. Outside, the first stars began to appear above Montecito. But inside, a marriage built on dreams and defiance was cracking under the weight of its own secrets. He walked back to the table, picked up the envelope, and whispered quietly to himself, "What have we done?" It was the first time he realized that love alone could never survive a lie this large. The sound of the heavy oak door closing behind Meghan echoed through the house like a final sentence. For a few seconds, no one moved. The guard stood near the entryway, unsure whether to leave or stay, glancing quietly toward Harry for instructions. The air felt thick, tense, and heavy with disbelief. Harry didn't speak right away. He was staring at the space she had just vacated, his hands still shaking slightly from adrenaline. The confrontation had left the room charged, but what remained was not anger. It was exhaustion. A bone-deep weariness that came from realizing that something sacred had been broken beyond repair. "Sir?" one of the security men said softly, hesitant to break the silence. Harry blinked, turning toward them. "Make sure she's settled. No press, no visitors. I want her safe, but I need space from her. You understand?" "Yes, sir," the taller one replied. "Would you like us to stay outside the main residence?" He nodded. "For now, yes. No one comes in or out without my clearance." They gave a small nod and stepped away. Through the window, he could see them walking down the gravel path toward the guest wing where Meghan had gone. Their movements were calm, professional, but he could feel their unease. They'd been through all kinds of situations with him, but this was different. This wasn't a royal event gone wrong or a tabloid ambush. This was domestic, intimate, human. When the house finally grew quiet again, Harry sank into the nearest chair. The envelope was still on the table, its edges slightly curled from being handled so many times. He stared at it, wishing he could unwrap